Hello, this is Alex Parker, and you're listening to the Emergency Broadcast Network. It's been 6 months. 6 months since the world as we knew it crumbled. The skies are still darkened by the ash of cities long reduced to rubble. The air is thick with an eerie silence, only interrupted by the occasional howl of the wind or the distant groans of the undead. Before the outbreak, we were just like any other species, fragile, selfish, proud. A species so consumed by its own technological advancements that we never stopped to ask whether we were truly in control. And then it happened. It didn't come with the roar of an army or the explosion of bombs, but in whispers. A virus, a mutation of something old, something that had always been there in the background, hiding. At first, the symptoms were harmless. A fever, a cough, a fleeting malaise. But it spread quickly, and by the time we realized the true threat, it was already too late. The cities fell first. Then the small towns, the countryside, the farms that once fed us. People turned on one another, not just because of fear, but because of desperation. Survivors were forced to flee, to adapt, to become something else. There are no governments left. There are no borders, no rules. Only the survivors and the dead. And us. We still survive. But for how long? I'm broadcasting on the last functional frequency I could find. Frequency 404, named after the error code that appeared when we tried to connect with the outside world after the fall. It's been weeks since I've heard another human voice. But I'm still here, still broadcasting, because there's always a chance that someone somewhere is still listening. And if you are, you'll hear my voice, and you'll understand what has happened. And maybe you'll understand why we keep fighting, why we have to. The first days were nothing like what we'd prepared for. Oh, we'd seen the movies, read the books, heard the theories. It was always some quick and brutal collapse, something so fast we'd never have time to prepare. But that's not how it happened. No, it was much worse. It was slow. Too slow. That's the thing they don't tell you when you read about the apocalypse. The fear, the constant tension, builds gradually. You don't notice it at first, but the world begins to tilt. Things start to break down, just a little at a time. We were still connected to the world for a while. The internet didn't collapse immediately. Social media was alive with messages, pictures, and video updates, like some warped parody of normal life. People were still going to work, still posting selfies at their local coffee shops, oblivious to what was brewing. And then the news started. At first, it was nothing serious. A virus outbreak in some remote area, an isolated incident here or there. But it spread, faster than anyone could have predicted. Cities started locking down. People started wearing masks, and the government issued guidelines. Stay inside, quarantine, self-isolate. I remember the first time I heard the word quarantine on the news. It sounded like something you read about in history books, something from a past disaster. But it was real, and it was only the beginning. It didn't take long before the hospitals overflowed, and the virus, it didn't just kill. No, it did something far worse. It turned people, changed them. They came back, not the same, but not gone either. The first time I saw a walker, that's what we called them later, though I don't know if the term really fits, was at a hospital. I'd gone to check on a friend who had been infected. She had a fever, a cough. By then it was too late. The doctors didn't know what to do. She was one of the first to turn. I still remember how she looked when she came back. Her eyes wide and empty, Her skin pale, almost gray. Her lips were blackened, as though the infection had taken over her entirely. And the worst part? She didn't even remember me. The doctors, the few who were still around, couldn't stop it. We couldn't stop it. The world fell apart right before our eyes. People thought it would be like any other outbreak. A quarantine here, some medicine there, and we'd be fine. But this wasn't any other outbreak. This was different, and it was spreading faster than anyone could predict. When the first major city fell, the media tried to downplay it, but it was too late. The outbreak was already global. Within days, entire countries shut their borders. The air felt like it was charged with something else, the threat of total collapse. People weren't just sick anymore. They were dangerous. The government declared martial law, but it didn't matter. The systems fell. They couldn't even stop the panic. Among the chaos, a few of us managed to escape. At first, we didn't know what we were running from, the infected or the end of everything we knew. We didn't know if we were going to survive. I remember one of the first faces I met after leaving the city. Her name was Sarah. She was running from a group of infected. She had a rifle, but it was useless. They were everywhere. The whole street was crawling with them, slow-moving but relentless. I pulled her into an abandoned building just as they closed in. "I thought I was done for," she said, breathless. "Not today," I told her. We waited. I kept my head down, and we listened to the groans from the street below. She was one of the lucky ones, but her story didn't end there. No one's does. Then there was Mike. I found him on the outskirts of the city, right after the first wave of violence. He was holed up in a small grocery store, picking through shelves. I almost didn't approach him. I had no idea who he was or whether I could trust him. But there's something about survivors. You can spot them from a mile away. Mike was no different. He was resourceful, calm under pressure, and damn good at scavenging. He told me he had a wife and a daughter. They were gone now. "They didn't make it," he said, voice flat. He didn't even need to explain. I knew. When I asked him about his plans, he just shrugged. "Get by. Keep moving. Try not to get bit. That's all we can do." I didn't ask him what else was out there. Not yet. We were both just trying to survive. But I could tell something in his eyes had changed. Whatever Mike had been before, that person was gone now. And then there was Ellie. Ellie was one of the most unexpected survivors I'd ever come across. She was a nurse, or had been anyway. She was a little older than me, maybe in her late 30s, but she had that calm, no-nonsense attitude that was hard to ignore. At first, she didn't talk much. She just took charge, got to work, setting up makeshift medical stations, organizing our supplies. People listen when someone knows what they're doing, and Ellie had a way of making sure no one forgot it. She said she couldn't save everyone, but if she could save just one. Her voice cracks as she talks about the people she couldn't save. The ones who came to her with wounds, with bites. It was never easy. But Ellie kept going. She never stopped trying to help, even when the world had stopped helping. The first days of the outbreak were the hardest for all of us. The chaos, the confusion, the overwhelming loss. But there was still something worth fighting for. Each of us had our reasons. We were survivors, after all. Even in the worst of times, there's always a reason to keep going. Days turned into weeks. The once bustling cities, filled with the hum of modern civilization, were now nothing but empty husks. Nature, too, seemed to grow quieter, almost as if it was mourning the world that had been lost. but we kept moving, always moving. That was the only constant we had left. The survivors were few, but we were a stubborn bunch. Every day felt like a battle, and in some ways, it was. We had learned quickly that the world didn't care about us anymore. We were no longer the rulers of Earth. We were just another part of the food chain. In the first days, we relied on whatever was left. Power grids were down. Water was scarce. Food? Well, we found what we could. But we couldn't rely on that forever. Then, one day, we heard rumors of a safe haven. A place where people had managed to survive, where food and water were rationed and protected. It wasn't much, but it was something. We decided to go after it. Mike had his doubts, as always. "How do we know it's not just another trap?" he asked, his hand instinctively tightening around his rifle. Ellie was quieter than usual. She hadn't said anything in hours. I could see the tension in her face. She was thinking about something. Maybe about the people she'd tried to save. Maybe about the lives we couldn't protect. But Sarah, she was different. She was the one who believed. The one who said we had to try. We couldn't just give up. "If there's a chance," she said, "we have to take it. We owe it to the ones we lost." The journey was brutal. We were constantly on edge, not just because of the infected, but because we were losing time. The safe haven, we learned, was far, much farther than we'd originally thought. The landscape had changed, too. Cities had become ruins. The few roads still passable were filled with debris and vehicles abandoned in haste. The air was thick with a strange kind of stillness, as if even the winds were too afraid to blow. At night, we'd set up camp wherever we could find shelter. Sometimes it was an abandoned house. Sometimes it was just under the stars. In those quiet moments, I would think about who we were before all of this. I wondered if we'd ever go back to the lives we'd left behind. Could we ever return to what we once knew? Or were we destined to stay in this strange new world? Mike was always the first to stand guard. Even when he was exhausted, he didn't want to show any weakness. Sarah, on the other hand, would always check the perimeter. She'd walk out sometimes, into the darkness, not saying a word. I'd hear her footsteps crunching in the gravel, and I'd wonder if she was running from something or running towards something. Ellie spent most of the time keeping our wounds treated, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The reality was setting in. There was no end in sight. We had learned to avoid large groups of the infected. They were everywhere. But sometimes you didn't have a choice. Sometimes they came to us. One night, as we were about to settle down for the evening, the ground shook. I remember that feeling, the heavy thud in the air, the way the world seemed to tremble beneath us. We grabbed our gear and headed out. It wasn't long before we saw them, a horde, shambling slowly in the direction of our camp. We were too close to outrun them, and there wasn't much cover nearby. "Get back!" Mike shouted. "Move!" But we couldn't move fast enough. They had seen us. The sounds of moans and growls filled the air as the first of the infected stumbled forward, their eyes vacant, mouths hanging open. The horde was too large to take on head-to-head. We had to use the environment. We split up, running in different directions, trying to lead them away from our camp. I kept my breathing steady as I darted through the ruins of a nearby building. The infected followed me, slow but relentless. I could hear their footsteps echoing in the dark, the grotesque sounds of bodies dragging themselves across the concrete. There was no time to think, only to act. I found a dead-end alley, but the infected were right behind me. Their growls grew louder. I had no choice. I had to make my stand. With my back against the brick wall, I raised my rifle and fired. The first shot hit one of them square in the forehead, but the others kept coming. They didn't stop. The rifle clicked empty. Damn it. I cursed under my breath, fumbling for the sidearm at my belt. That's when I heard it. A loud bang. Another shot. Another. Mike. Mike was there. He was on the other side of the alley, picking off the infected one by one, clearing a path. "Come on," he yelled. "Let's go." I didn't need to be told twice. We ran, sprinting for our lives. By the time we made it to the others, the horde had been dealt with, but we were all shaken. Ellie checked our wounds as Sarah stood watch. "We're getting close," Sarah said. There was a glint of hope in her eyes. "I can feel it." The next day, as we neared the coordinates for the safe haven, we stopped to rest. But things weren't as they seemed. From a distance, we saw smoke rising in the air. It wasn't a good sign. Ellie, Mike, and I approached cautiously, but Sarah and I didn't say a word to each other. We both knew the same thing. "Do you think they're still there?" she asked. I didn't know. I wanted to say yes, but in my gut I could feel it. We had been moving toward hope, but what if hope was just another lie? We moved through the ruins carefully, the smoke growing thicker as we got closer. The wind carried the faint, acrid smell of burning wood and something else, a sharp, metallic scent that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't the smell of a normal fire. This was different, almost unnatural. We kept our distance, peeking through broken windows and around the corners of abandoned buildings. There was no sign of movement, but the smoke still rose into the sky, twisting and billowing like some dark omen. "What happened here?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. I could see the fear in her eyes. This wasn't the kind of safe haven we had imagined. We had all heard rumors of people banding together, of surviving communities. But this didn't look like any place where hope could thrive. We cautiously advanced, moving from shadow to shadow. Our weapons were at the ready, our senses heightened. We didn't know what had happened here, but we were going to find out. The ruins stretched for miles, the landscape eerily silent except for the occasional distant rumble of falling debris. We were getting closer now, the smoke thickening. The ground beneath our feet stained with something darker. The road ahead was blocked by an overturned vehicle, its tires burnt and melted. We climbed over it, my mind racing with questions. We finally came to the outskirts of the supposed safe haven. At first I thought it was deserted, but as we peered around the corner, we saw something that caught us off guard. A figure, a person, was standing on a rooftop, looking down at us. They didn't move. "Who's that?" Mike muttered, his hand instinctively going to his rifle. I didn't have an answer, but I felt an uneasy knot in my stomach. There was something strange about this place. We had heard rumors of people trying to create new societies, but this felt different. It felt like a place where something had gone terribly wrong. "Maybe they can help us," Sarah said, a hint of hope in her voice. "Maybe they know what happened here." The figure on the rooftop finally moved. They crouched down, then disappeared from sight. It was as though they had vanished into thin air. We waited, the air thick with tension. After what felt like an eternity, the figure reappeared at the base of a building. Their eyes locked with ours, and I could feel the weight of their gaze. They didn't speak at first, but the silence between us felt like 1,000 unspoken questions. "Are you from here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The person nodded, their face shadowed by a hood. Their clothes were torn and worn, just like ours. They didn't look like the saviors we had been hoping for, but they were alive. "This place is not what it seems," the person finally spoke. "It used to be a safe haven, yes, but now it's a trap." A cold chill ran down my spine. We had come so far, and now it seemed we were standing on the edge of another nightmare. The person introduced themselves as Lucas, a survivor who had once believed in the safety of this place. He had been here when the community first started, when there was food, water, and a semblance of order. But it hadn't lasted long. "The people here weren't as they seemed," Lucas continued. "At first, they were just scared. We all were. But then something changed. The longer we stayed, the more desperate they became. People turned on each other. Food became scarce. And those who had power, they didn't just want to survive. They wanted control." As he spoke, I could see the bitterness in his eyes. He was a man broken by the very thing he had fought to survive: humanity itself. "They started to build walls," he said. "And I'm not talking about walls to keep the infected out. These walls were to keep us in. They started to divide us, turn us into commodities." I felt a sense of dread creeping over me. Could it be true? Could people really become that desperate? And when I tried to leave, Lucas paused, his eyes haunted by the memory. They tried to kill me. I barely made it out with my life. The others? They're still there, but I can't go back. We stood in silence, processing what Lucas had just revealed. The notion of a safe haven had been shattered. There was no safety here. There never had been. The decision was clear now, but the weight of it was unbearable. "We can't go back," Mike said, breaking the silence. His words were heavy, final. But Sarah, still holding on to the hope that we might find something worth saving, spoke up. "What if there's a way to fix it? What if we can take control back from them?" I could see the conflict in her eyes. The idea of turning back seemed impossible to her. She couldn't give up hope. Not now. Not after everything we had been through. But I knew. We couldn't save them. Not all of them. Not the way things had turned out. "We have to keep moving," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "We can't afford to stay. Not here. Not with them." Lucas nodded, his face grim. "I know it's hard, but I've seen what happens when hope becomes a weapon. People use it to manipulate others, to break them down. And when there's nothing left, they turn on each other. It's just survival. It's all we've got now." With no place to turn but forward, we gathered what little we could salvage and began the long trek away from the shattered remains of the safe haven. The world outside hadn't become any kinder. Every step we took felt heavier than the last. The echoes of the past seemed to haunt us, mocking us with every turn. But we knew we had no other choice. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we pressed on. We were tired, hungry, and broken, but we were alive, and that had to mean something. The world had changed, but so had we. We were no longer just trying to survive. We were trying to find a new meaning in a world that had forgotten what it meant to be human. Would we find a new place to call home? Would we build a new community of survivors, one where trust and cooperation could return? Or would we, like so many others, become a part of the darkness? Only time would tell. But as we walked into the night, we knew one thing for certain. We weren't giving up. The world was quiet again. A stillness that felt like a threat, a reminder of all that had been lost. We walked in silence, our footsteps crunching against the gravel-strewn road, our eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The sun was setting, a pale orange glow melting into the ash-colored sky. Mike led the way, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his gaze distant. Ellie walked just behind him, her eyes constantly watching the rest of us, a habit she couldn't shake. Sarah walked beside me, her fingers wrapped tightly around the strap of her backpack, the light in her eyes dimmed. And Lucas. He kept his distance, always at the rear, a ghost haunting our small group. Night was falling, and we needed to find shelter. That's when we saw it. A small abandoned farmhouse just off the road. The paint was peeling, the windows shattered, but the walls were still standing. "Looks clear," Mike murmured, his voice flat. "I'll check it out," Sarah offered, already moving toward the house. We followed, watching as she slipped through the door, her silhouette framed against the fading light. Moments later, she reappeared, waving us in. Inside, the air was stale, the scent of dust and decay thick. There were faded photographs on the walls, smiling faces frozen in time. A family once lived here, a family that was gone now, just like so many others. We barricaded the doors, a ritual we had perfected. Mike took his usual place by the window, his rifle ready. Ellie started checking our supplies, her hands moving with a precision born from necessity. But it was Sarah who caught my attention. She stood by the old fireplace, staring at the charred remains of wood and ash. Her fingers brushed against a small, soot-stained photo frame that had fallen to the floor. A young girl, maybe 6 or 7, grinning with a missing front tooth. Her arms were wrapped around a dog, a scruffy little mutt with a wagging tail. A simple moment, a snapshot of a life that no longer existed. "They had a life here," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "A real life." Ellie walked over, her expression softening. We all did. Sarah's shoulders shook just a little, and she tried to wipe her eyes. "I keep thinking, I keep hoping. Maybe there's a place where this didn't happen. A place where kids still laugh, where people still..." Her voice broke, and she turned away, pressing her forehead against the cold, cracked wall. Ellie stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Hey, it's okay. It's okay to feel it." For a moment, we were just there. 5 strangers bound together by the cruelest of fates. Survivors, yes, but also mourners. Mike's voice cut through the silence, rough but not unkind. "Feel it, but don't drown in it. We keep moving or we die." I wanted to say something, to offer some kind of comfort. But what could I say? That it would get better? That we would find safety? We had all heard those lies before. Instead, I walked to the window, looking out at the shadowed fields stretching into darkness. The wind stirred the tall grass, a whisper in the silence. "Sometimes, I wonder if we're the lucky ones," I murmured. "Or if we're just the ones who were too stubborn to give up." Lucas leaned against the wall, his eyes hollow. "There's no luck left, just choices and consequences." Night swallowed the world outside, and the cold began to seep into the room. We set up our makeshift beds, a patchwork of blankets and old clothes. Ellie took the first watch, her tired eyes fixed on the door. But none of us truly slept. I could hear Sarah's quiet sobs muffled against her pillow. I could hear Mike's restless shifting, the creak of the floor beneath him. Lucas's slow, steady breathing, always calm, always distant. I thought about that family, about the girl in the picture. I wondered what had happened to them. Did they make it? Did they become like us? Just ghosts in a world that had forgotten what it meant to be alive? Or did they become something worse? In the darkness, the memories clawed at me. The faces of the people I had known, the ones I had lost. The laughter, the arguments, the little moments that seemed so ordinary once. It felt like another life, a dream I couldn't wake up from. The night stretched on, endless and oppressive, and in that silence, I realized something. Survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about remembering who we were, what we had been. Even if it hurt. Even if it was the only thing that kept us human. The pale morning light cast long shadows through the broken windows. The cold air crept beneath our thin blankets, stirring us awake. Another night survived, but at what cost? Mike was already at the window, his eyes fixed on the empty road. Always the first one awake, always on guard. Ellie stretched with a sigh, while Lucas lay still, his eyes open but empty. Sarah sat by the cold fireplace, the photograph of the little girl and the dog still in her hands. We need to move, before the light fully breaks. Mike's voice was flat, emotionless. We packed our things quickly, our routine like clockwork. We bundled up the remaining food, a few cans and a stale crust of bread. The dying embers in the fireplace were snuffed out, leaving no trace of our presence. But as we opened the back door, we froze. A figure leaned against a tree in the grass, clothed in rags, skin pale, and eyes sunken. A man, maybe in his 30s, maybe younger, but aged by suffering. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely a breath. "Help me." Mike immediately raised his gun, his gaze sharp. "Stay where you are, don't move." I'm no threat." The man's hands shook as he lifted them, dirt-stained palms open. "I haven't eaten in days. I'm begging you." My eyes met Sarah's, a silent fear in her gaze, but something else, too. Pity. "We can't," Ellie whispered, her voice a thin thread, while Lucas stood back, a shadow against the wall. "We barely have enough for ourselves." "We leave him," Mike stated, his voice a cold blade. "Anything else is a risk." "But what if it were us?" Sarah's voice trembled as she stepped forward. "If someone found us?" Mike's grip tightened on his gun. "It's not us, and it won't be if we make the right choices." The man's tears welled, spilling over his cheeks. "I had a family. My wife. My daughter. They're gone. I couldn't find them." Sarah stepped closer, ignoring Mike's glare. "We have enough food for one more day. We can spare something." "And what do we eat tomorrow, Sarah?" Mike's voice was sharp. "We die because we were kind? In this world, kindness is a death sentence." "He's just a man," Sarah cried, tears shining in her eyes. "A man who could betray us, or slit our throats in our sleep," Ellie murmured, though her voice was softer. Lucas finally stepped out of the shadows. "We help him, once, and then we go. We're not murderers." Mike clenched his jaw but said nothing. After a moment, he lowered his gun sharply. "Do whatever you want, but if this costs us, it's on you." Sarah pulled out a can of food, extending it to the man, who took it with trembling hands, tears now flowing freely. "Thank you. Thank you." "Don't stay here," Lucas warned, his voice cold. "Head south. Find another shelter. Avoid the main road." The man nodded weakly, clutching the can like a lifeline. With the last of his strength, he struggled to his feet and limped away, disappearing among the trees. Silence lingered. Sarah tried to control her breathing, while Mike stared ahead, his expression icy. "We did what was right," Sarah whispered, but her voice wavered. "Maybe," Ellie murmured, "but right doesn't keep us alive." We continued walking, but the quiet between us was heavier than before. An invisible crack had formed, between mercy and caution, between heart and survival. And in a world like this, such cracks could become chasms. The road stretched on, an endless ribbon of dust and shadows beneath a pale morning sky. Our group walked in silence, each step a quiet battle against the weight of hunger, fear, and regret. Sarah walked a few paces ahead, her gaze fixed on the horizon, the photo of the little girl still clutched in her trembling hands. Mike stayed at the front, his rifle steady, his face a mask of cold determination. Ellie kept her distance, her eyes shifting between the trees, watching, always watching. Lucas remained at the back, his figure half lost in the mist that clung to the fields. But the silence was different now, thicker, almost suffocating. The man we had left behind, his desperate, tear-filled eyes, lingered in my mind. I wondered if he was still alive, if he had listened and taken the road south, or if he was already just another nameless body among the ruins of this dying world. Sarah's footsteps faltered for a moment. She turned, looking back at the fading tree line. I knew what she was thinking, if he had found the strength to keep walking, if we had saved him, or merely postponed his end. "Keep moving." Mike's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "We can't stop here. The open road's a death trap." But the tension in his voice betrayed him. Even Mike, hardened and ruthless as he was, couldn't fully escape the weight of the choice we had made. Ellie glanced at Sarah, her voice barely a whisper. "You did what you could." "Did I?" Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "Or did I just watch him die from a distance?" "You gave him a chance," Lucas spoke, his voice calm but distant. "That's more than most would do now." A distant sound echoed in the mist, a low, mournful groan carried by the wind. Instinctively, Mike raised his rifle, his eyes narrowing. We froze, listening. The groan was followed by a rustling, faint but steady, like something moving through the brush. "Get off the road," Mike hissed. We darted toward a shallow ditch, crouching low, hidden by the tall, dying grass. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat like thunder in my ears. The rustling grew louder, and then we saw them. 3 figures stumbling through the mist. Their clothes hung in tatters, their faces hollow, pale, eyes glazed over. Walkers, or what was left of them. They moved with a slow, unnatural rhythm, arms hanging limply at their sides. But hunger drove them, an instinct as primal as death itself. Mike's finger hovered over the trigger, but he didn't fire. The noise would draw more. Instead, we stayed still, silent, our breaths shallow. One of the walkers stopped, its head turning slowly, its lifeless eyes seeming to scan the field. For a sickening moment, I thought it had seen us, but then it staggered forward, following the others, vanishing into the mist. Minutes passed like hours. Only when the sound of their dragging feet faded entirely did we dare to breathe again. "We need to get out of this open area," Mike whispered, his voice cold but steady. "Forest line. Now." We crawled from the ditch, staying low, our bodies tense, eyes scanning every shadow. Sarah gripped her backpack tightly, the photo of the girl now stuffed into her pocket. But I saw the change in her, a hardness settling behind her eyes, a quiet resignation. She hadn't just seen a man in need. She had seen a mirror, what any of us could become. The forest swallowed us, its twisted trees and thick underbrush wrapping around like skeletal arms. Mike moved quickly, leading us through the dense maze, his footsteps sure, his focus unshakable. Yet even as we put distance between us and the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had broken in our group. A silent fracture, thin but deep and growing. A choice had been made. Mercy had been shown. But in this world, even mercy was a dangerous gamble, and all we had left were choices. Choices and consequences. The forest thickened around us, shadows twisting in the pale light of dawn. We walked in silence, each of us lost in the quiet war of our thoughts. The man we had left behind, his pleading eyes, his desperate whispers, those were ghosts now, haunting our every step. But it wasn't just him. It was every choice we had made, every door we had closed, every scream we had ignored. Survival wasn't just a battle against the dead. It was a slow erosion of everything that made us human. Sarah walked with her head low, her shoulders heavy, the photo of the little girl now crumpled in her pocket. Mike's face was a mask, cold and unreadable, his rifle gripped tightly as if it could shield him from the guilt he refused to show. Ellie's gaze wandered, restless, her fingers tracing the edge of her knife, seeking comfort in its cold, brutal simplicity. Lucas trailed at the rear, silent as ever, his eyes distant, a ghost among the living. The trees thinned, and we found ourselves at the edge of a cliff, a gray valley stretching below us, shrouded in mist. Broken roads cut through the desolation, crumbling buildings clawed at the sky, their hollow windows like empty eyes. Once, this might have been a bustling town. Now, it was just another graveyard. Mike scanned the horizon. We'll find shelter there. Scavenge what we can. No one argued. It wasn't that we trusted his judgment, just that there was nothing left to say. We made our way down, the wind howling against the rocks. Sarah stumbled, catching herself against a dead tree, her breaths sharp. I moved to help her, but she shook her head. I'm fine. But she wasn't. None of us were. At the base of the cliff, we passed rusted cars, their shattered windshields glittering in the faint light. We stepped over scattered bones, silent reminders of those who hadn't been as lucky. Or perhaps they were the lucky ones. The first building we reached was a crumbling diner. Faded signs hung by broken chains, and the once bright neon letters lay shattered on the ground. We forced the door open, the hinges screaming in protest, and stepped inside. Dust coated every surface, tables overturned, plates smashed, and the scent of decay clung to the air. Mike checked the back, his rifle raised, while Ellie began rummaging through the debris, hoping to find anything useful. Sarah walked to the bar, her fingers tracing the faded photographs pinned to the wall. Smiling faces, friends sharing a meal, a family celebrating a birthday. Memories of a world that no longer existed. Lucas leaned against the window, staring out into the fog, his reflection hollow and tired. This place used to be alive, Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. People laughed here, ate here, loved here. Not anymore, Mike replied, his tone sharp. This world isn't about what was. It's about what is. We take what we can, and we keep moving. Sarah's eyes glistened, her fingers clutching the edge of the bar. And for what, Mike? Just to keep walking? Just to keep feeling this emptiness? Mike's expression hardened. It's that or nothing. A bitter silence settled over us, but it was Lucas who finally spoke, his voice soft, almost a whisper. Maybe it's not just about staying alive. he murmured, his gaze never leaving the mist outside. Maybe it's about remembering even the smallest pieces of who we were, because without that, we're just the dead walking. His words hung in the air, heavy and true. Ellie paused, a can of expired soup in her hand, her expression unreadable. Mike turned away, but his grip on the rifle tightened. Sarah stared at the photographs, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. And me? I looked around this ruined place, at the ghosts of happiness, at the shadows of a life that seemed like a dream now. I wondered how long it would be before we too became nothing but faded memories in a broken world. We stayed there for a while, not just to rest, but because for the first time in a long while, we felt something beyond the fear. We felt the weight of everything we had lost, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hope. We stayed there for a while, not just to rest, but because for the first time in a long while, we felt something beyond the fear. We felt the weight of everything we had lost, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hope. It was strange how silence could feel so loud. No one spoke, but I knew we were all thinking the same thing. About the people we used to be, the people we'd never see again. The sky above us had begun to turn amber, the way it did just before nightfall. Beautiful, almost unnaturally so, as if the world was apologizing for everything it had taken. Then Ellie broke the silence. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. We froze. A distant rumble, low, steady, not thunder, not an animal. It sounded mechanical. Mike stood up slowly, scanning the tree line. "There's smoke," he said, pointing toward the hills. Thin, but rising fast. I followed his gaze. He was right. Someone, or something, was out there. We all looked at each other. It wasn't a question of whether we were ready. We were never ready. But we stood. We gathered our things, and we started walking toward the smoke, toward the unknown. Because hope, even in its faintest form, asks only one thing of us: keep moving. We moved carefully, keeping low as the trees thinned. The smoke was clearer now, dark, rising in coils. Not a campfire, something bigger. The air felt different too, heavier. Each step forward pressed on us like a warning. Then we saw it. Just beyond the ridge where the valley dipped into what used to be the main road. There was a wrecked convoy, burned out trucks, twisted metal, and something else. Something still alive. At first we thought it was a survivor. It stood in the middle of the wreckage, motionless, as if waiting. Taller than a man, limbs too long, head tilted in an unnatural angle, no face, just a smooth, dark surface where features should have been. Reflecting us. Ellie gasped. The thing turned. It didn't walk. It glided. Fast. Silent. Mike raised his weapon, but it was already gone. Vanished between frames, like it had skipped time itself. We backed away, breath caught in our throats. Then, from the woods behind us, we heard it again. Number nodded. Them. Dozens of footsteps. No voices, no breath. Just motion. Surrounding us. The flicker of hope we felt? It was still there, but now it burned beside something else. The realization that this world wasn't just broken. It had evolved. And it had made something new. Something that knew we were here. And it was coming. We ran. No time to think. No time to speak. Just instincts. Branches tore at our clothes as we pushed through the undergrowth. Behind us, the silence was louder than any scream. They weren't chasing us like animals. They were herding us, pushing us somewhere. We stumbled into a clearing, a wide, flat space that used to be a power station. The tower was still standing, barely, steel girders warped, cables twitching in the wind. But the old backup generator was there, and it still had power. Mike looked at the tower, then at us. "We can overload it," he said. "Create a blast, big enough to take them out. Maybe even give others a chance to escape if they're watching." "But we'll be caught in it," Ellie said. "We'd be right in the center." Mike nodded. "It's not a good plan," he added. "But it's a plan." The group fell silent. We had seconds to decide. There were other options. We could split up. One of us could stay behind. Maybe trick them, lead them away. Maybe survive, but maybe not. The sound of static filled the air. The same interference we heard on the radios. The one we thought was just broken signals. Now we knew. It was them. And they were close. Too close. I looked at Ellie, then at Mike, then at the tower. Somewhere out there, someone might still be alive. Maybe watching, maybe waiting for a sign that someone was still fighting. It came down to one question. Was survival enough anymore? Or was it time to make a stand? Mike didn't wait for a vote. He moved fast, ripping open the generator panel, sparks flying as he bypassed safeties with trembling hands. "I'll do it," he said, not looking up. "You two get out, now." "No." Ellie stepped forward. "We stay together. We finish this together." I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to run, but she was right. We'd lost too much already. Too many faces, too many names. If we had a chance to end it, or at least send a message, we had to take it. I joined Mike at the panel. "What do we do?" He looked at me. No fear in his eyes now, just resolve. "You hold that lever down when I say. The overload will build fast. Once it hits critical, it'll light up the whole sky, and them with it." Outside, the static grew louder. Shadows moved at the edge of the trees, slow, deliberate, watching. We were out of time. Mike gave the signal. The tower hummed, then roared, a deep, vibrating growl that shook the ground. I gripped the lever, feeling the heat rise. The creatures stepped into the clearing, pale, eyeless, drawn to the surge of energy. They didn't hesitate. They advanced. 10 seconds. The light from the tower turned blue, then white. 5 seconds. They were almost on top of us. 3. Ellie grabbed my hand. 2. Mike smiled. 1. Everything turned to light. Then, silence. For a while, that's all there was. Then, wind. Ash falling like snow, and distant voices crackling through the static. Repeat. We saw the surge. Coordinates locked. Survivors. Do you read? I opened my eyes. I was still alive. Ellie too, burned, shaken, but breathing. Mike didn't make it. But the creatures were gone. And the world, what was left of it, finally heard us. A blast of light in the darkness. A signal that we were still here. That maybe the end wasn't the end after all. We buried him at the edge of the clearing. No gravestone. Just a piece of twisted metal from the tower, driven into the earth like a marker, like a promise. The ground was still warm when we said goodbye. None of us spoke much. What do you even say when someone gives everything so that others might have a chance? Mike wasn't the loudest. He wasn't the strongest. But when it mattered most, he stood taller than all of us. He didn't try to be a hero. He just did what needed to be done. That's the part that stays with me. Not the explosion, not the sky turning white, but the look in his eyes when he said, "Go. I'll hold them." He knew what it meant, and he chose it anyway. Some people live their whole lives chasing meaning. Mike found his in a single moment, and because of that moment, we're still here, alive, grateful, changed. So we keep moving. For him. We keep hoping. For him. And every time we hear the wind through the trees, we remember. Mike didn't just light up the sky, he lit the path forward. You've been listening to our story. Every word we shared, every whisper of fear and flicker of hope, it all happened before we got here, before we reached them. The voices we used to hear through the static, the ones we clung to like lifelines in the dark. They were real. They were waiting. We found them. Or maybe they found us. The new base isn't much. Just cold walls, dim lights, and a roof that doesn't always hold. But it's safe. It's enough. They welcomed us not like strangers, but like family. Because in this world, surviving means more than finding shelter. It means finding each other. And now, from this base, from this fragile piece of what once was, we send our voices out into the dark, just like they did. Maybe someone, somewhere, is still out there. Maybe they're scared, or lost, or tired of hoping. So we tell our story not just to remember, we tell it to remind that there is life beyond the silence, that we can choose courage, even when everything inside us wants to give up, that people like Mike, like us, still matter. If you're hearing this, you're not alone. This is not the end. This is the beginning of something new. Stay alive. Stay human. We'll keep the signal on, always.